Caseworkers are stretched thin, balancing high caseloads and endless paperwork. But with SpeakRight, documentation doesn't have to mean burnout. SpeakRight's Protective Services transcription cuts paperwork time dramatically, so you can meet deadlines, reduce overtime, and focus on what truly matters, the families you serve. With SpeakRight's free mobile app and desktop platform, caseworkers can capture detailed narratives anytime, anywhere, with just one tap to upload. SpeakRight is proven to lower stress and turnover, helping agencies retain dedicated staff while improving case quality. Don't let documentation slow you down. Let SpeakRight do the heavy lifting. Visit speakright.com/imprint to see how SpeakRight can transform your agency today. That's SpeakRight, SpeakWrite.com/imprint.
Hello and welcome to the Imprint Weekly Podcast. I'm John Kelly, Senior Editor of the Imprint, a daily news site covering child welfare and youth justice around the country. You can read all of our coverage at imprintnews.org or check us out on Facebook or Twitter at the Imprint News. You can also sign up on our homepage for our free weekly and monthly newsletters. And for professionals in child welfare and youth justice, subscribe to our Youth Services Insider section for a closer look at news on business, policy, and practice. The Imprint Weekly Podcast is also a member of the Safe Camp Audio Network. Check out our show page and all of the Safe Camp's other great podcasts at safecampaudio.org on the web or at Safe Camp Audio on social media. On this week's episode, Congressman Greg Landsman of Ohio's 1st District joins to talk about the Campus Housing Affordability Act, his new bipartisan bill to make dorm life attainable for current and former foster youth. We talked about the college dorm model in his home state that inspired the bill, how the legislation would work, and since he's on the committee that oversees Medicaid spending, we chatted a little at the end about the big, beautiful bill and how its cuts to Medicaid might impact families. So without further ado, here is our conversation with Congressman Greg Landsman. All right, we are joined today by Congressman Greg Landsman, who represents the 1st District of Ohio in Congress, to discuss a bill he has introduced with a bipartisan group of lawmakers to help current and former foster youth afford housing on college campuses. Congressman, thanks for joining us on the Imprint Weekly Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
House rules here are, you got to tell these folks a little bit about yourself before we get into the weighty issues of the day. So just give me a favorite in one of these categories. You can give me more if you want, but got to give me one: movie or TV show, musical group, book, or sports team. What do you got?
I mean, I'm a huge Bengals fan. I'm a big FC Cincinnati. So that's a soccer team, FC.
Okay.
That's our MLS team. I'm a big, West Wing was one of my favorite shows of all time. But my favorite book is Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Just reread it. It's just such a great book. And favorite movie, like Lincoln is one of my favorite movies. I'm just going through movies I own and download it on my phone and then I watch on a regular basis. And I watch
the rewatches. Yeah, they come to mind for me all the time.
I watched Lincoln, Silver Lining Playbook, Martian, and Social Network. Those are 4 movies I rewatch on a regular basis.
Those are all solid rewatches.
And Ali, one of my favorite
movies. A Few Good Men is mine. It's just anytime that's on, okay, I'm in for half an hour at least.
It's also Sorkin. I love Sorkin. Molly's Game is on. It's downloaded onto my phone. No, I own it. It's not downloaded, but I love that. That's a good.
Hell yeah. So this is a pretty straightforward and specific bill. It's not the 1,000 pages we're dealing with on budgets and spending. Before we talk about what's in the bill itself, can you kind of talk to us about, the issue that it's seeking to address and how it sort of came onto your radar?
Sure. So about 10 years, 15 years ago, you used to be able to use your housing voucher on college campuses. And then there was an issue in Iowa where some football players were messing around with the vouchers and instead of just resolving that particular issue, the Senate in its infinite wisdom decided just to say no one can use a housing voucher on college campus. And so all of these kids, including foster care, or kids, who have aged out, who are eligible for a housing voucher, can't use it on campus. So what happens is they end up not being able to afford college or affording college. They end up finding a way to make it work, but then they have to live off campus in order to use their voucher.
Mm-hmm.
And the issue is really complicated in that if you're anyone, certainly a first generation foster care, kid, and you now live off campus and you're starting this new experience, and college is, it's new and hard for everyone at first, and you're doing it all by yourself. It's one of the reasons why a lot of first generation kids who've had any number of issues don't finish that first year, because it's such a foreign experience, and you're doing it by yourself. I was running a nonprofit years ago called the Strive Partnership, where we looked at the things that are having an impact on improving outcomes for kids, all kids, but particularly kids who have been marginalized. And so we focused on school readiness rates and all of the things that we knew were working to get kids ready for school, including high quality preschool. And that led us to a ballot measure. And Cincinnati is one of the only cities in the country that offers 2 years of quality preschool, because we know it works. We know that if you're struggling to read and you want to get a kid reading on grade level, first, getting them ready for school is a big priority. But then having after school and summer learning opportunities for that kid will make a huge difference. All right, you go all the way down the continuum and you get to post-secondary enrollment and retention and completion rates. What we found was a program at the University of Cincinnati called the Gen 1 House for first generation students, including foster care kids, not entirely kids that were in the foster care system, but some. Mm-hmm. And they're in retention from year one on, and graduation rates were equal to, if not better than, everyone else on campus. So the question was, why? What are they doing differently? They're putting everyone together. They're giving them extra support. If you need help with your courses, selecting your courses, mentoring, it's better food. They're literally treating them like student athletes, and student athletes end up graduating in most instances because there is this support around them. So they couldn't really expand because they didn't have the money, because it was, you're saying to them, like, University of Cincinnati, why don't you open up 15 of these? And they're like, well, we can't. It would be great if we could use the housing voucher. Mm-hmm. That was almost a decade ago. And, when I got to Congress, I really wanted to get this bill passed. We tried a bigger version last time in my first term. Ultimately, I'd like to get to a place where anyone who's eligible for a housing voucher can use it on campus, and they can live on their own in a dorm. I mean, if they want to live off campus, they can. But if they want to be with students, they can be with students, or they can be in one of these what are called live and learn communities, where they're like with other people who have similar experiences.
It's really interesting. When I asked you sort of how it came on your radar, I think I was mentally expecting you to say, well, some young people who have experienced foster care came and met with me and talked about this. It really sounds kind of like, from what you're talking about, you sort of came to Congress with a solution in mind, right? Yeah, and that's sort of the gem of it. Right?
It was really frustrating because we wanted to expand this 10 years ago, this Gen 1. So I think they now have expanded it, but barely. I mean, barely in the sense that like it should be every kid who needs to be or wants to be in a more supportive environment. Like, I don't want to just be off campus, or I don't want to just be on a dorm, in a dorm, but I want to be with kids like me. And I may need some extra support. I may need some help with classes and, picking the classes so that I can manage it. And I may need some help tutoring. And I maybe I do want the better food, whatever it is. and this doesn't solve that entirely, but it will make, if everyone who's eligible for a HUD voucher, because everyone in these live and learn communities are eligible for HUD vouchers, most of them, because they are, foster care kids, kids that have, obviously aged out, kids who have experienced homelessness, et cetera. It would allow them to expand, not just on the University of Cincinnati's campus, but everywhere across the country. And it would make college not just more affordable for these kids, but it would make it much more likely that they get through that first year and they graduate with a degree, which is the transformative thing, not I was there for a semester, I got the degree. And so, yeah, it was one of, a half a dozen things that I came to Congress wanting to do. And we scaled it back a little bit because we're not in the majority. I can't get this done without bipartisan support, and hopefully this version of it will pass this year.
So the bill is called the Campus Housing Affordability Act. I believe you have a few co-sponsors, right? Mike Lawler, Joyce Beatty, and Don Bacon. Is that right? Have more joined the fray?
I suspect more have, but those are original co-sponsors. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Gotcha. So yeah, you kind of went over it generally there, but what specifically does the bill do? I mean, how does the language, without getting way too technical, adjust what is current law that you described?
So right now, because of what happened 15 years ago, if you have a housing voucher, you can't use it on a college campus, meaning you can't use it to offset the cost of college housing. So you can use it, but you have to be off campus. So you're like a mile away. And you've already, lived a, frustrating and difficult, probably trauma-filled life, but certainly one that's been isolated. Why are we isolating these kids further, or at least taking away that option? So the bill would say, if you're a foster care, if you are eligible because you were in the foster care system, you've aged out, including emancipated youth, you can use the HUD voucher to offset the cost of on-campus housing. So you can go and be in a program that's on campus, or you can just be in the dorm.
And the one question, as I read the bill, that came to mind for me is, like, sometimes you read this stuff and it's like, okay, maybe this is just legalese or it means something. That sort of section starts with the secretary, which I'm assuming is the secretary of HUD, may issue a waiver. Yeah. What does that mean in practical application? That it's like a one-by-one thing, or each administration would have the choice to have that waiver available? Or, you know what I'm saying? Like, are you leaving it in that way up to an administration to give the okay to youth or not? I just couldn't follow that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I'll go back. I mean, these things do get amended. No, the goal is to say, though, the waiver exists.
Right.
So if it isn't clear as it needs to be, we'll make sure it's clear.
Gotcha.
So there's no reason to say don't do it. No, we want to make sure we do this for people.
Sure. So take our listeners into a little bit of how the sausage gets made from here. You mentioned, West Wing was a favorite show. Obviously, we all know that's not exactly how it goes. You don't have a markup and a committee vote, and it doesn't go like that. So how, I think a lot of people would be interested, how does something like this, a very targeted, specific bill, how do you see this thing becoming law at some point? What would this strategy be?
We go to the committee of jurisdiction, and then there's a couple ways you can do it. You can just go get 100 co-sponsors. So I go to the floor, and during votes, and we have votes, 3 days out of the week, you go to the floor and you just start handing them out. And you send out an email, you have people go around to offices, and you try to get as many people to sign on. I'm more of the opinion that you got to go to you want it to get picked up in the committee. And so you want the committee to take this on. And that's one of the reasons why Joyce Beatty is one of the leads, is that she's on financial services. This goes to that committee.
Okay.
And so, in fact, I think Don Bacon is too. So they all, essentially what we do is we get everybody on that committee to sign on, and then we get the chair to take it up and then bring it to the floor and get it passed, and try to have the companion bill in the Senate. So you just look at the members of financial services, which is what we'll do, and try to get every one of them to sign on so that the chair of the committee is like, oh, this is, I see, my entire committee supports this. I'll go ahead and bring it up for a markup, which means that you bring it up and you can mark it up some changes. That's where we would make amendments, clean and move, scrap shall to will. I don't
yeah, all that stuff.
Yeah. And
then it seems like recently, or probably for a long time now, something like this tends to get rolled up into, a bunch of different relatively like-minded things and move like that. That would be the expectation. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, or it just goes on suspension, meaning that it's pretty straightforward and we suspend the rules, meaning you don't have to debate and there won't be amendments. And those bills, we vote on several suspensions a week, and those bills just get passed either by a voice vote, or if somebody wants an actual vote, then we'll, and sometimes there'll be people who vote against it, but for the most part, this is one of those things because it provides flexibility and it's for a discrete group. I wanted to broaden it. I want it to be everybody, right? And if you're eligible for a housing voucher, you should be able to use it on campus. However, there are issues, like does that start to take away from other people? I mean, there's only so many housing vouchers, which makes sense.
True.
The idea is to say, okay, the people who really do need it the most, who would most benefit from this, are foster care, emancipated youth, and they, being in a community on campus could be a game changer for them. And I don't want to, just keep pushing something that isn't. I want to get this done, and then do the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. And I think that's a different. Some people do sort of say, well, this is the whole fix, and until we have the whole fix, we can't do anything. Or if you do, certain pieces of the whole fix, you may undermine our ability to do the bigger fix. Very, reasonable. I'm a big believer that for the most part, not in every instance, but for the most part, chip away. Just start and start giving people relief and help now. Because I think it's rude to ask people to wait. And I don't want to ask kids who would be eligible because, they're foster, they're emancipated youth or, formerly foster care kids that would be eligible. I don't want them to wait.
Right. You, as you were mentioning your work with Strive, you've also served as a city council member. I believe you ran the Office of Faith-Based Initiative as a young man, right?
As a young man, yeah. So go ahead.
I was just curious how your experience in education and in local government, I guess, and in state government, informed your views and your knowledge about child welfare as an issue.
Well, you get to see so much of it and how brutal it is for so many kids. And, you want to be part of building something better because it's just, I've never seen anyone do it super well. Right. I mean, it's just a mess. And in some places it's deadly. I mean, it's just so dangerous and awful. Anyways, you see it up close and personal, and you start to, care even more about being part of making things happen for these kids who, in not every instance, but in many instances have endured some pretty terrible things. And in every instance have endured a lot of trauma or some trauma. And all of that can be supported by a community that wants to help. It's all made me want to, interestingly enough, put these kids at the top, right? So they've been sort of at the back for so long. And so in this bill, there's a lot of folks who are HUD eligible, or who I believe should be in this bill. But we started with these kids because, this is one of the many things that ways in which we can say, we're going to put you at the front of the line now. You've endured enough.
I get you out of here on this one. We've been talking on the podcast quite a bit lately about Medicaid, which is a enormous piece of the funding and structural pie of child welfare, but also of the safety net that can prevent kids and parents from ever kind of coming into contact with child welfare. Now, you serve on the Energy and Commerce Committee in the House, which is where the cuts to Medicaid in the House version of this big, beautiful bill originated. My read of the way they tried to structure these cuts, which are substantial, I think it's something like $800 billion over 10 years or whatever it landed at. It did seem to me like they did try to create them to avoid this head-on impact for families, right? That it's the parents with children. It's, with the notable exception, I guess, of undocumented families and children. But, are there specific aspects of the proposed cuts that made it through the House that you think will challenge the healthcare access of kids and their parents?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think anytime you take $1 trillion out of the healthcare system, you're going to affect everybody or most people in the system. And so, yeah, I mean, like rural hospitals who really rely on this, or children's hospitals, those folks will, you'll see care shrink or hospitals shutter their doors. So anyone in that area, is going to lose the kind of coverage or care they had. And that's going to be problematic, if not deadly. If instead of driving 15, 20 minutes, you'd have to drive 2 hours. I mean, it is a huge problem to take that kind of money out of the healthcare system. It's also true that the changes they're making will affect children. I mean, so they're reducing the amount of money they're giving to states. States will then in turn reduce the amount of money in the system, and they'll cut coverage. I mean, that's how they're saving money. And then they said, well, states can't turn around and raise the provider tax. So that, it really will lead to fewer people on Medicaid, which is their goal. Their goal was not to, fix or solve something else. Their goal was, well, we've got to find $1 trillion in order to pay for tax cuts for the wealthy. Because, if you let the tax cuts for the wealthy expire at the top, you don't need to cut anyone's healthcare. And if you adjust the corporate tax rate, you don't even need to deficit spend. You can do tax relief for everybody, but they're choosing to provide these tax cuts for the super wealthy. That requires them, because they won't touch the top rates, that requires them to find cuts. They chose Medicaid, and they're reducing what they're giving to states. States, make up 70% of the spend. Or sorry, the federal government does. Then they're creating this new reporting requirement. So people work, but they're adding all of this paperwork. So it's not a work requirement. It's a paperwork or a reporting requirement. Mm-hmm. And they know, based on what happened in Georgia and Arkansas, that if you put up enough barriers and you require people to report every couple of months, somebody's going to screw up, or people are going to screw up. They're going to forget to report, and they lose their coverage. And that's what happened. And that's what they're banking on. And so, yeah, then families with kids will lose their coverage, 100%.
The name of the bill is the Campus Housing Affordability Act. Congressman Greg Landsman, thank you so much for joining us on the Imprint Weekly podcast.
Hey, John, thank you.
Thanks to Congressman Greg Landsman for joining us today, and thank you to Speak Right for sponsoring this episode. The Imprint Weekly podcast is a production of the Safe Camp Audio Network, which is a division of Fostering Media Connections. Please visit safecampaudio.org on the web or at Safe Camp Audio on all major social media. This podcast is produced and mixed by Christine Anjoko, with music by Luke Giroux and Cyrus Elliott. If you enjoyed this episode, we would love it if you would consider subscribing or giving us a 5-star rating on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you download your podcasts. And we would greatly appreciate if you would consider supporting our work here on the podcast and in print. Small donations from our listeners and readers go a long way towards helping us grow and cover more great stories in child welfare and youth justice. To support us, it's very easy. Just visit imprintnews.org/donate. You can follow the Imprint on Twitter and Facebook by searching the handle @theimprintnews, and visit us on the web at imprintnews.org. You can always get us over email at tips@imprintnews.org. I'm John Kelly, and we'll see you next week.